Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.
Yes, sir, we're all set. You may proceed now, formally.
Okay. Everybody, thank you so much for your patience. My name is Marcel Schwants, and I'm calling this morning from the state of Tennessee in the United States of America. So welcome wherever you are. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. All right.
Marshall, are you there? I think you just need to click on the slide to move to the next one.
One second, folks. Slide. And before we get really rolling, I'm going to ask for the attendees to just take out a sheet of paper, or if you have access to a notepad and a pen, go ahead and do that at this time, because it's going to be an interactive presentation. I'm going to have a couple of exercises along the way. So we're going to learn about not only authentic leaders, but also how being an authentic leader ties into building a workforce of champions, meaning really a high-performance culture. So whatever level you find yourself in your current company or organization, whether you're an executive or a director, manager or supervisor, or even if you've been identified as what we call a hypo or a high potential, every one of us can learn and apply authentic leadership principles to engage those we're really directly responsible for. And that's really the bulk of our presentation. The piece on engagement is important because, well, it's the foundation for a high-performance culture. So I'm going to talk about what the best leaders do in order to motivate, support, and really retain their employees. Now, what is authentic leadership? Well, during, I would say, probably the last 50 years, leadership scholars have conducted more than 1,000 studies in an attempt to determine the styles and the characteristics and personality traits of great leaders to answer this very question: what is authentic leadership? And you know, if you do a Google search on the term, you'll find countless different models out there, all suggesting or advocating for the behavioral traits of what an authentic leader does or is. Yet none of these studies to this day has produced a clear profile of the ideal authentic leader. Thank goodness, because if the books on leadership ever mass produce a cookie cutter leadership style, well, then people will be trying to imitate it and lose their authenticity, and others around those people, well, they would see right through that. Now, you can learn from the experiences of an authentic leader, certainly, but it's very difficult to be successful when you're trying to be like them. So people trust you when you are genuine and authentic, not a replica of someone else, if you will. So what's the starting point? Well, let me suggest that the first thing to do is to lay a foundation by knowing your true authentic self. There are countless books written on the topic by thought leaders on self-awareness, in which, if you're a student of emotional intelligence, well, it falls into one of the quadrants of VI. If you're keeping up with the research of Daniel Goleman, people like Peter Salovey, John Myers, and others. Most of these thought leaders are saying that self-awareness is one of the most important capabilities for leaders to develop. It is a learned trait. And what they're saying about self-awareness is that in order to practice it, it first helps to assess your own strengths, shortcomings, and limitations, drawn out of your self-confidence, self-assessment, and resilience. True self-confidence sprouts from self-knowledge. So if you don't really know you, you can't really like you, goes the saying. And self-confidence is built on liking who you are. What you don't know about yourself in, say, a business deal can sink that deal, right? And what you don't know about yourself in, let's say, managing conflict between employees or departments, well, it can lead to further conflict. That means knowing both your strengths and your blind spots. And resilience is the willingness to really reward oneself for corrective behavior and to try it again a different way. So in a resilient mindset, instead of self-defeating behaviors of, well, why me, we want to be able to probe and ask ourselves questions like, well, why do the same issues keep coming up over and over? Whether it's in my business unit or even in your personal life, say in your marriage. Or why do I respond to situations with anger, fear, optimism perhaps, or withdrawal? Maybe you want to ask the question, well, what makes me think, act, and feel the way I do? What really makes me tick, right? What pushes my buttons? The Harvard Business Review conducted a study that I found I wanted to reference this morning. And they did a study back in 2007 where they interviewed about 125 top leaders to determine the common traits of the authentic leader. And of all the leaders they interviewed, David Pottruck, this gentleman that you see here, he is the former CEO of Charles Schwab. He had one of the most persistent journeys to self-awareness. Now listen to the story I'm going to read here. An all-league football player in high school, Pottruck became MVP of his college team at the University of Pennsylvania. After completing his MBA at Wharton and having a stint with Citigroup, he joined Charles Schwab as head of marketing, moving from New York to San Francisco. An extremely hard worker, Pottruck could not understand why his new colleagues resented the long hours he put in and his aggressiveness in pushing for a result. And this is what he said: I thought my accomplishments would speak for themselves. It never occurred to me that my level of energy would intimidate and offend other people, because in my mind, I was trying to help the company. So Pottruck was shocked when his boss one day sat him down and told him, hey, Dave, your colleagues do not trust you. And as he recalled, he said, that feedback was like a dagger to my heart. I was in denial as I didn't see myself as others saw me. I became a lightning rod for friction, but I had no idea how self-serving I looked to other people. Still, somewhere in my inner core, the feedback resonated as true. So Pottruck realized that he could not succeed unless he identified and overcame his blind spots. And I'm telling you that denial can really be one of the greatest hurdles that leaders face in becoming self-aware. And I think we're all pretty much guilty of that at some point or another in our careers, perhaps. We all have egos, right, that need to be stroked, and fears and insecurities that need to be smoothed over. So authentic leaders realize that they have to be willing to listen to feedback, especially the kind they don't want to hear. Many leaders don't want to listen to the ideas, the opinions, or the constructive feedback of others, right? It's kind of hard to acknowledge something that may be true because, well, as they say, truth sometimes hurts. What we perhaps might fear loss of respect from our peers or our subordinates. So what happens, these leaders, well, they may appear strong on the outside, but in reality, their fears and insecurities send a loud message that, well, they don't want anyone to disagree with their views. And unfortunately, if you've ever worked with this type of leader, it can be exhausting. So when the truth is courageously communicated, people and organizations flourish. They really do. Leaders who may be lacking the courage to engage problems, well, they may be veering off course in one of two directions, okay? And I put it like this. They would either, one, seek to dominate, or two, they will seek to withdraw. So it's really fight or flight, or violence or silence. So in authentic leadership, we want to learn to ingrain a servant-based style of leading, if anyone has studied servant leadership. That's more open and inclusive to bringing out the best in your people. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to highlight 10 traits I have personally witnessed over the years as a practitioner, as a coach, as a consultant, that are traits that make an excellent, authentic leader. And number one, if I can rotate my slide, here we go. Number one, authentic leaders treat themselves as human beings. So what does that mean? Well, they make room for laughter and joy on a daily basis. So before they treat others with respect and admiration and dignity, well, they make sure that they're first doing it for themselves. Two, authentic leaders, well, they listen to understand instead of replying. So they hear other people, they hear other people's joy, perhaps other people's frustrations, and they learn about their people's values, and then they connect to their deepest desires and wishes. Three, authentic leaders lead from the heart. What does that mean? Well, they're not afraid to show their vulnerability and genuinely they look after the needs of others, like I mentioned earlier, as a servant leader, developing the people around them. This, by the way, has everything to do with engagement, and we're going to touch on that soon. Four, authentic leaders let people see their real selves. They're able to open up and say, you know, I'm really struggling with this project. I need your input. What would you do in my situation? Now, being transparent may be perceived as a weakness in today's kind of top-down command and control leadership styles, but eventually such leaders will see that it's actually a strength by the way people respond to them. Five, authentic leaders approach conflict with great awareness. We touched on this earlier. So when upset, they find out what part of the story they may be missing, focusing on the problem and building the relationship rather than, you know, casting blame or creating distance or stonewalling. Six, authentic leaders know they are allowed to make mistakes. That's the human part again. So they admit when they're wrong, right? They learn from their mistakes and then they try and try again. This speaks to the resilience we touched on earlier as part of self-awareness. So when authentic leaders mess up, well, they apologize and they do it quick. Seven, authentic leaders, well, they have the wisdom and discernment to look at difficult situations from several angles. So they talk to several people to get clarity and understanding before they determine a course of action. And sometimes the decision may not be popular, but it's always the right one. Eight, authentic leaders, they practice empathy. They imagine being in the other person's shoes and will ask themselves often, how would this person want to be treated? This is the platinum rule, by the way. We're all familiar with the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But the platinum rule, well, that takes it up to another level. Do unto others as they want to be done too. 9, Authentic leaders give others the opportunity to stretch and grow. They have a keen interest in knowing what new challenge is there for their team members, and then they make it happen. And finally, authentic leaders, well, they speak their truth. They don't say things to sugarcoat. They don't try to please others or try to look good in front of their peers. What that means sometimes also is that they don't betray themselves or others by using words or making decisions that are not aligned with who they truly are. So you're never going to hear an authentic leader say that they threw someone under the bus, right? They speak clear, honest, and with integrity. Now, did anybody notice a pattern in those 10 traits? If not, let me give you a clue. 9 out of 10 have to do with employee engagement. So we're going to transition into how to create a high-performing culture through employee engagement. And we're going to understand how you cannot fully engage your employees unless you're a great leader. Now, what does engagement really mean? A major difficulty that a lot of organizations fall into is that they don't start out on the same page on how they define engagement. And there's 1,000,001 definitions out there, so I'm going to boil it down to this. This is my working definition. An engaged employee, is one who is fully absorbed by and enthusiastic about their work, and so it takes positive action to further the organization's reputation and interests. Employee engagement is the emotional commitment that the employee has to the organization and its goals. And it's leadership's greatest challenge and responsibility to meaningfully engage the workforce for any of these inputs in the blue arrows above or outputs in the yellow arrows below to happen. Because the employees are the ones that will move the organization forward from good to great and beyond. So leaders at all levels, not just at the top, but middle managers as well, must do more than just tell employees what to do. As leaders, we have to create and foster the environment for an engaged workforce. One way to think about engagement is to consider employees as business partners. So those on the call that have been in business, well, perhaps you know that if one side of a partnership withholds information or doesn't involve the other partner in decisions and putting plans into action, well, what's going to happen? It's going to put a strain on that partnership, right? The latest stats say that in business, 90% of partnerships fail. And the same holds true with your workforce. You see, engagement is a business initiative. It's not a functional one. The purpose for involvement and collaboration must be business-based. So the bottom line is that the more engaged an employee is, the better the performance overall. And it's a total team effort. Every level in your organization is accountable for contributing to engagement and collaboration. It has to happen between departments and between levels, horizontally as well as vertically. So whatever the business initiative, high performance can be driven through an informed and involved workforce. And in its simplest form, you can view it like this for both your development as a leader as well as your employees' development when you're planning for high performance. You might want to start with answering what's needed, like the competencies required to ensure success, right? I'm not talking about just hard skills or technical competencies only, but I'm speaking of behavioral competencies for the positions you're hiring or developing, like being proactive, being a team player, being a problem solver, etc. Then you want to review how your planning is working to see if anything needs changing, and then you end with your evaluation to see what needs to change, and then you start the cycle all over. And as managers at all levels, you really want to ask yourself if you're planning out your employee development process by doing these things that lead to great engagement. Engaging new hires that are high potentials, and how can we help you with your professional development interests? Conversations really in the first month. It has to happen early. This is as part of the onboarding process. Then discussing development plans periodically and supporting them to advance their development goals. And also, you want to engage new hires in conversation about what motivates them within the first 1 to 2 weeks of employment, again, as part of your onboarding process. And if you're in a place where it's time to strip the old and make some changes, leaders need to, number one, just be authentic. What that means is communicate openly and often, because this builds trust, right? Don't just assume you know your employee's skill level and career aspirations. So have those face-to-face discussions to get a better understanding of what their career goals are and how they think they can accomplish them. 2, know the skills, talents, and even personality traits of your employees, because now you can set the stretch goals to inspire those individuals to work to their potential. So you want to find out, are they in the right job roles? Are their gifts and talents being fully utilized? And then lastly, you just back away and let them do their thing. So in this phase here is the trust again takes over, because you want to trust your teams and then empower them with accountability. Now, all these factors of engagement are key to retaining your employees and really keep them from jumping ship, if you will. So if you're struggling as a leader with the concept of engaging and retaining your employees, especially your top performers, well, you're not alone. Research data over the years here in America all support the notion that corporate America is in a state of crisis when it comes to retaining their best people. The interesting thing that is being discovered is that what companies measured before in those traditional employee opinion surveys, perhaps you have one every year, was that what they were really measuring is employee satisfaction rather than engagement. In other words, finding out if employees are happy with their jobs and managers and satisfied with their working environment doesn't overall correlate to engagement. In fact, research has, one research company is called DecisionWise. They conducted a 5-year study where they asked hundreds of managers across different organizations, and it all pointed out to the required components of engagement came down to satisfaction, motivation, and effectiveness. So what is the impact on engagement's impact on the workplace? Well, you see from this slide, a lot of good things can happen. And it's proven time and time again that those are organizations that invest in developing their people, especially their leaders, who will then in turn collaborate and engage with their employees. As a result, we'll have many of these outcomes. They also require less training time, experience fewer illnesses, and have fewer accidents, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let me acknowledge that there's no magic pill solution, okay? And it won't happen right away. This will take a few seasons of culture change through a lot of assessments, bringing in an outside firm perhaps to do some coaching and training, and having a lot of really hard conversations. But what I want to encourage for every listener is this is a process over the long stretch. But it doesn't mean that it has to feel like climbing a mountain. So if you're really committed to engagement and building a high-performing culture as a leader, I just want to assure you that over time, over a few seasons, it can be done, and you will experience culture change. So I mentioned a few slides back that one approach to great engagement is to consider employees as business partners. Remember that? Now let me elaborate on this because I really feel that this is important. So when leaders engage their workforce with what I call an entrepreneurial spirit, like owning your own business, good things begin to happen. An entrepreneurial spirit is really a mindset. The best way I can put it is like this. It's an attitude and approach to thinking that actively seeks out change rather than waiting to adapt to change. Does that make sense? It's about seeing the big picture and thinking like a business owner toward that end goal. I'm going to illustrate with Sarah Sutton-Fell. She's the CEO and founder of FlexJob, and this is what she says. It really hits the nail on the head for me. She says, to me, an entrepreneurial spirit is a way of approaching situations where you feel empowered, motivated, and capable of taking things into your own hands. Companies that nurture an entrepreneurial spirit within their organization encourage their employees to not only see problems, solutions, and opportunities, but to come up with ideas to do something about them. This kind of culture is a big component of employee retention for these companies that you see here. So what that means for you is that authentic leaders and their employees must work together to foster a culture that really enables ideas to flow from anywhere within a company. So letting people take their ideas and see them through is very empowering and motivating. So both are responsible for maintaining that entrepreneurial spirit as the company grows. And I'd like to cover 7 ways to foster an entrepreneurial spirit. So let's cover that right now. Number 1 is really to think like a business owner. Employees should feel empowered to make decisions, and employers should let them. Now, for some of you listening, that may require a significant shift in the way you lead. What I'm saying is decision-making processes and approvals, well, they need to be simplified, and leaders need some coaching in how to kind of hand off the reins to their employees, and employees need some training and coaching and mentoring to help them confidently grab hold of the reins. And so in thinking like an owner, you should also minimize the rules. When unnecessary policies that come from a bureaucratic leadership style happens, it really stifles the entrepreneurial spirit. So if you're the one setting down new policy, I just want to give you a playful advice. I want to suggest that you go on a rule diet. What I would do if I were in a bureaucratic environment and I have the power to change that, the first thing I would do is I would enlist a few people cross-functionally to create a council where they meet just to look for ways to keep the bureaucracy to a minimum. And by doing this, you're also encouraging great engagement. It's a great engagement practice to do this. 2, give people the opportunity to drive and bring their ideas to life. So, for example, if a team member comes up with an idea that may not be part of their scope of responsibility, help connect them with the right teams and let them bring their ideas to life, because this is going to expand their skills. It's going to help expand their thinking, and also for you as a leader, it's going to foster cross-functional teamwork. This is another great engagement piece. Number 3, excuse me, create a recognition program that rewards people for thinking like an entrepreneur, right? So as an authentic leader, you want to reward those who are constantly sharing ideas they may be simple and small ideas, but they still make a significant difference to, for example, your customer experience or the bottom line. So you want to be able to recognize those people. 4, try to work with colleagues in different departments for cross-pollination of ideas. One of the reasons smaller companies are naturally more entrepreneurial is because of this. The team is small enough that everyone has a voice and input on major decisions, even if it's not part of their core responsibility or strength. So as your team, department, or company gets bigger, please be vigilant of getting segmented off from other departments and creating silos. So we want to avoid that. You want to keep the steady flow and diversity of ideas and fresh perspectives coming from different angles that lead to cross-pollination. Number 5 is, again, I can't stress this enough, always communicate. As teams, departments, and companies grow, internal communication gets more complex and naturally suffers. So be intentional about it. So if employees are, if they're being asked to think like business owners, well, then they need to have the same level of information that most owners receive. Sure, there are some things that are confidential by nature, but I'm speaking of giving them a clear understanding of the big picture, projections, forecasts, and having the same access to financial information, etc. 6, create a culture of questioning. Questions fuel the creative process and entrepreneurial mindset. So I'm not talking about encouraging, rebellious behavior by poor performers who question everything. No, that's not what I'm saying. So here are some ideas. Perhaps you can open meetings. Some of you may have scrum meetings first thing in the morning. So throw out a thought-provoking question that stimulates collaboration. Or maybe you can create a message board or even a Facebook page where coworkers can write down stimulating questions that they may have. Or pose a question of the month to get everyone focused and thinking about a certain aspect of the business. And finally, you need to set an entrepreneurial example. So it has to come from the top, but also from within. So whether you're in upper management or not, setting an example for yourself and your department can always help trigger more responsive, innovative ideas around you. So wouldn't you want to surround yourself with that by tapping into, the brilliance of your high performers? Because if you're not open to new ideas and new way of doing things, well, how can you expect your team to be open to them as well? Now, regardless of your leadership style, whether you're, the team building type, or you're a great innovator, or you're just a bottom line results type of leader, it's common knowledge that all good leaders in management of people and functions, well, they have to have both hard skills and soft skills. This is universal knowledge. Hard skills on the left are occupational in nature, right? And then soft skills on the right, they're behavioral in nature. So one relies on IQ, the other on EQ. Hard skills are typically easy to observe, right? We can quantify and measure hard skills. It gets the job done, and you cannot manage without it. We need hard skills. But great leadership really requires a sophisticated approach to both. But I'm going to be the first to admit, as a soft skills leadership coach, this can be quite challenging. You see, the more your role involves people and it involves leadership, the more your job must focus on blending the occupational and the behavioral, the technical and the interpersonal, so the hard and the soft. If you can achieve this internal balance, your team or organization will thrive. Now, this balance can be really difficult because many people define themselves by, their ability to be experts in the hard skills area, their occupational skills, while viewing behavioral skills in the soft skills area as really secondary or incidental. In this way, especially for leaders, traditional soft skills are harder to get right. But research has proven time and time again that soft skills development is really needed to succeed in today's marketplace, because that's where most of the problems in the workplace happen. And that's why the majority of this webinar is exactly for this reason. It's to develop your soft skills. Let me illustrate with one research study conducted in 2013 by Adecco Staffing here in the U.S. 500 top executives were asked, which of the following do you feel best defines the gap in the U.S. workforce skills gap? And nearly half, as you can see, about 44%, they believed that the gap was in the soft skills area: communication, critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. Research shows that companies with high turnover often have conflict or low morale because they don't communicate well. When we consult to companies to help reduce their turnover, the first thing that we look at is data from exit interviews to determine recurring patterns. And I'm going to be honest, many times one of the top 5 patterns we find consistently points to poor communication or conflict management skills, which are both soft skills development areas. And what I know is this: both leaders and employees with an awareness of and an ability to apply soft skills at work, I truly believe as a practitioner, because I've seen it, will find a much more fulfilling and rewarding experience and generally be more highly engaged and happy. Now, how many of us are into brain studies? If you're into brain research, to introduce a new interpersonal skill is quite difficult because it means replacing the old skill. And in your brain, any new pattern for the brain to develop at first will seem extremely awkward. But once the new pattern proves to be more satisfying than the old pattern, and if it keeps getting reinforced, well, what happens is your neural pathways new neural pathways and new connections will begin to form and establish themselves. And that's great news for soft skills development because all of it is learned traits. So if you're a left brain person, perhaps on the call, and you reside in the world of task management, process, systems, data, and numbers, etc., and you want to complement what you already do best. Those are your strengths, right? You want to complement what you already do best by building up the capacities that come from the right side of your brain. That's where soft skills reside. Let me give you a visual. You can look at the 2 functions of leading and engaging effectively and using both sides of your brain this way. This is kind of a busy slide, but I'll walk you through this. Leaders that develop and master the task side with your left brain, this is about management, where performance measures, analytics, goals, job roles reside. And then the people side with your right brain, and this is about leadership, where collaboration and engagement and development happens. They usually experience new breakthroughs. Just like running a successful business, in both worlds, you help to foster the environment for building a great team. One without the other usually results in dysfunctional management. So the leader who manages by only focusing on task management, well, they may show little concern for the development and morale of team members. And so the team suffers and the business suffers. But on the flip side, the leader who only focuses on the people side of the business and runs what I call a country club style of management, where they're supportive and they engage well and they have great recognition programs, but with little concern for task efficiency that lead to achieving goals and results, well, guess what? That team will also suffer. So you need this proper balance. Now, let me tell you, authentic leaders cannot succeed on their own. Without strong connections to give you, perspective and input and counsel and advice, to give you some, or even for you to get buy-in as a leader from different groups up and down the org chart, it's very easy to lose your way if you don't have these strong connections, because then you'll begin to lose that trust I spoke of earlier in the entrepreneurial spirit. And this is a great way to engage your team members, to ask for perspective, to ask for input and counsel, and get buy-in from different groups. So how do you go about building an engaged workforce? Well, over the course of 35 years, we've all heard of the Gallup organization. Well, they have interviewed literally millions of employees and over 80,000 managers across a broad range of companies, industries, and even countries to find the core of a great workplace. And what they found from this mountain of data is really astounding. The findings were published in the seminal book, First Break All the Rules. In this extensive research, Gallup was able to measure the core elements needed for leaders to attract and keep the most talented employees. And so when the dust settled, they made a huge discovery. Measuring the strength of a workplace can be simplified to 12 questions. 12 questions. Now, these 12 questions don't capture everything you may want to know about your team or workplace, but they do capture the most important information. Now, as I go through these questions on these next few slides, this is where I'd like to ask you to take out a sheet of paper and a pen. And what I'd like you to do is, number one, to honestly self-assess whether some of these questions resonate with you as a direct report to another person in position of leadership, meaning the person that you report to, whether that's a supervisor, manager, director, VP, or executive. Okay? What I want you to think about is, does this speak truth about your manager? And the second thing I will ask you to do is to read the questions as a leader with direct reports reporting to you to determine where you stand with your employees. So on your sheet of paper, just go ahead and draw a line down the middle so that you have two columns. And what I want you to do is, as you read the questions, I'm going to read it to you, and as you think about it and reflect on both your manager and then yourself as manager, I want you to rate yourself on the scale of 1 to 5 for each item, 5 being best. So I'm going to walk you through the first two questions just so we have the exercise correctly here. Okay? So for example, here are the 12 questions to measure the strength of a great workplace. So number one is, do I know what is expected of me at work? So on the left column, how would you assess that about your manager? And on the right column, how would someone that reports to you assess that about you as manager? So rate both sides 1 to 5. Do I know what is expected of me at work? Question 2, do I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right? So again, how would you assess that about your manager? Rate 1 to 5 on the left column. And then how would someone that reports to you as a manager assess that about you? And then rate that between 1 and 5 on the right column. Okay, so we're going to pick up speed here, right? Number 3, at work, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? Left column and right column. In the last 7 days, have I received recognition or praise for doing good work? 5, does my supervisor or someone at work seem to care about me as a person? Six, is there someone at work who encourages my development? 7, at work, do my opinions seem to count? 8, does the mission or purpose of my company make me feel my job is important? 9, are my coworkers committed to doing quality work? 10, do I have a best friend at work? Let me clarify that question real quickly. What this means is, does a worker, or do you have somebody that can help develop yourself, somebody that you can come to for advice, for feedback, for support, somebody that motivates you and encourages you? 11, in the last 6 months, has someone at work talked to me about my progress? And finally, number 12, this last year, have I had the opportunity at work to learn and grow? Okay, so just look quickly at your scores. Now I'm going to focus on the right column. How did everyone do? Did anyone score 4s and 5s on all 12 in assessing yourself as a manager? Because if you did, I'll tell you, if a leader can create the kind of environment where employees answer positively, if this was sent out, say, to your department, to your function, or even to your whole company, and employees can answer positively to all 12 questions, 4s and 5s, then according to Gallup, you will have built a great place to work.
Folks, you can insert your opinion in the chat box or question box in terms of 4 or 5s if you have scored yourself.
In our initial conversations with clients, when we meet to discuss employee improvement and retention strategies, I always start with this questionnaire. Now, let me just point out that this same research from Gallup also said that those employees who responded more positively to the 12 questions also worked in business units with higher levels of productivity, retention, and customer satisfaction. And secondly, and really most important for the sake of today's presentation, is that the 12 opinions were being formed by the employee's immediate manager, if that's you. So we've all heard the old saying, right, that people don't leave companies, they leave managers, and nothing can be further from the truth here. It was the manager that was the critical player in building a strong workforce. So research backs this up, that people leave managers, not companies, because so much money has been thrown around at the challenge of keeping good people, when in the end, turnover is mostly a leadership issue. If you have a turnover problem, look first to your leadership.
Marcel, we are receiving some comments on average. It seems like the right column is on the 4, but they're saying mostly the boss is getting on the 3 average.
Interesting. Now, breaking those 12 questions down, Gallup found, of the 12 questions, the most powerful questions are those with a combination of the strongest links to the most business outcomes. And those questions were the first 6. And so I'm putting this up on the screen basically to illustrate that. And every single one of these has to do with engagement. So if you're going to design and conduct your own employee opinion survey to assess engagement satisfaction, whether you do it internally or you bring a consulting company to do it, this is where you should start. Securing 4s and 5s to these 6 questions should be one of your most important responsibilities. So, a little bit of a debrief slide here. As you look over your scores on your sheet of paper, you may want to determine 3 things. 1, which areas should I continue to focus on? Because these are your strengths. So how do you even improve on what you're already doing well? 2, which areas are being neglected? Because then this is a great opportunity then to make some really tough decisions. And then finally is, well, what needs to happen now? What is one intentional thing you could do to change the situation? Usually I leave this slide a little longer, as I'm doing now, just because I know some of you are writing these questions. So assessing the employment engagement satisfaction to those 12 questions that you just saw, it's going to shed a light on also all the reasons your employees are not that into you as a leader or into their work. Have you ever looked around and maybe seen disinterested and disengaged employees and wondered what's going on? I'm going to highlight one reason why that is the case, and I put it up on the screen. The majority of employees don't understand their employer's vision, business goals, strategy, brand promise, key initiatives, and marketplace realities. And this is according to a survey of 23,000 employees conducted by Harris Interactive. Their research reviewed, among other things, as you can see from this slide, that only 37%, this is very, very key, only 37% of employees clearly understood what their employer was trying to achieve and why. So this research is proving that employees don't know what game they're in, how it's played, and what the stakes are. And I want to illustrate the seriousness of this, especially the top statistic, with a Stephen Covey soccer analogy. If those of you are soccer fans, if you've ever read the book, The Eighth Habit, here's what he wrote. Stephen Covey in the Eighth Habit, if, say, a soccer team had these same scores, only 4 of the 11 players on the field would know which goal is theirs. Only 2 of the 11 would know what position they play and know exactly what they are supposed to do. And all but 2 players will be competing against their own team rather than the opponent. Imagine trying to compete with the majority of your team not even knowing what game you're supposed to be playing. If this is the company or if this is the team or department you find yourself in, you're exactly in this situation. I'm not saying this to shame anybody, but I just want to bring out the reality of what you're dealing with. So not knowing the big picture leads to disinterest for your employee. How can you get excited about something you know little to nothing about? So to examine how well your employees understand the game you're in, how it's played, and what the goal is, reflect on how well leadership at all levels of your organization communicate to employees your mission, your vision, and other key statements and other business initiatives in real-life terms, rather than what's posted on a memo or on the company website. And that brings us to today's very important poll. I'm going to do this poll. This is not a poll that you're going to utilize the screen. So I'm just going to ask you to do this as a private poll for yourself. And here is today's poll question. How much do your employees know about things like business goals, your most important initiatives, how your business works, and how the pieces fit together? Now think over that question, just kind of take a mental note of it before I transition to your answer options on the next slide. A, they are always well informed. Management communicates openly about those things. B, they are sometimes informed. Management communicates when needed about those things. C, they are rarely informed. Management hardly communicates about those things unless there's a crisis. Or D, they have no idea. Management is often invisible and unavailable. You're free to type that into your chat box if you'd like. If not, just like I said, make this a private poll to yourself. The poll is really intended to trigger a discussion amongst yourselves in your respective organizations about the reality of what you're facing as a team or company.
We have certain comments coming on the option C too so far.
Very good. Okay, transitioning. I want to talk a little bit about employee recognition. This is a great engagement tool for retention. Employees should always feel appreciated and not taken for granted. So that means they need to be continually recognized and celebrated for high performance and the behaviors that make your business goals and success possible. So the recognition is most effective when it's given in the context of a larger goal or a business results focused activity. So when an employee who does something big by putting in the extra effort needs to know you noticed and understand his or her effort to ensure success. This really matters. There are 3 key points of employee recognition that you should keep in mind. One is to establish the criteria for what performance or a contribution constitutes a rewardable behavior or action. What's the criteria for it? 2, the recognition must have specific information about what behaviors or actions are being rewarded and recognized, because now we can measure it. And keep in mind, it helps if the recognition happens as close to the performance of the actions as possible, not a month, 3 months later, or a year later, so that the recognition reinforces behavior that you as an employer want to encourage, right? And I also want to caution against being what I call having a knee-jerk reaction. For example, showing up for work on time doesn't really count in most cases. You have to be specific, descriptive, and measured. 3, avoid a program in which managers select the people to receive recognition. I'm not very big on those. So this type of process will be viewed as favoritism. This is why processes that single out an individual, like the Employee of the Month, are rarely effective. And make sure to tie it to their value to the organization. Now, money rewards are fine. I'm not a big fan, but money rewards, they're okay. But it does skew the notion of value. So you want to link it to appreciation and praise instead, because then these are true motivators. Treat employees as valued team members, not as numbers. So they need to know that they're valued. Okay, as we head into for the home stretch today, I want to touch on a crucial topic for authentic leadership engagement to succeed, and I've mentioned this throughout the presentation so far, and that is trust. I have seen personally whole teams and even companies crumble when they don't stand on a foundation of trust. And I'm bringing this up toward the end because if you're considering elevating your leadership skills and engagement is a project that has landed on your plate, whether you're an executive or an HR manager or the owner of a small office, or maybe you're a director of a 75-person business unit, this is the pillar in which leadership and engagement should stand on. Okay, trust needs to be in place if enduring change is going to happen. Now, while trust is somewhat of a subjective concept, it can be defined, measured, and improved upon. Among key leadership trusting behaviors are doing what you say, keeping your commitments, keeping the best interests of others in the forefront of your mind, and always communicating honestly, which what I would call is having the emotional honesty, the presence of mind in authentic leadership. And in relation to engagement, trust must be in place for improvements and collaboration and retention to happen. Now, everybody, I want to acknowledge trust is a reciprocal concept. It needs to be coming and it needs to be coming back. It needs to be going and coming. It needs to be shared. And it needs to be extended and be mutually beneficial. I know that in the world of top-down command and control leadership structures, trust is more related to job survival. But in the new world we live in of connect and collaborate, well, trust has got to be built on different qualities. Stephen Covey, in his book, The Speed of Trust, he writes, trust is a function of two things, character and competence. Character includes your integrity, your motive, your intent with people. Competence includes your capabilities, your skills, your results, your track record, and both are vital. So on my on the next couple of slides, I'm going to do our last interactive exercise with you, so be prepared to participate. I'm going to list 6 trusted behaviors on the screen that are culturally ingrained in the leadership structures of some great companies. And these trusted behaviors are what drives their employee engagement and defines how their leadership teams and employees really interact day to day. So as you look at this, this is called a trust meter. This is an abbreviated version of the tool that I use because we don't have time to do the whole thing. But as you look at this trust meter, I want you to conduct kind of a self-assessment of whether you find those key trusted behaviors in your leadership and organizational behaviors. This is a great starting point for developing those soft skills I told you about. So as you look at the trust meter, let me give you quick instructions. you will see that on the left, I'm going to read the trusted behaviors, and then I want you to, I'm also going to read the short descriptions on the right column. Then I want you to rate yourself on the center column as honestly as you can between 1 and 5, 5 being best. And we are shooting for 4s and 5s here. So for number 1, the trust behavior is talk straight. And the description of that would be being honest and letting people know where you stand and not spinning the truth. So at this point, go ahead and rate yourself 3 times in the center column for the trust behavior talk straight. You're shooting for 4s and 5s in those 3 descriptions. The second one is demonstrate respect. And the description is that you show that you care. You respect every person's dignity, and you show kindness in the little things. So rate yourself on the center column for each of the 3. Create transparency. The description is be open and authentic. You don't hide information, and you keep from having hidden agendas. Rate yourself in those 3 areas. Right wrongs. You admit mistakes, you don't cover things up, and you take action to recover. Show loyalty. You give credit freely. You don't badmouth people not present. And don't disclose private information. So rate yourself for those 3 areas. And lastly is deliver results. But again, this is an abbreviated version. The descriptions are you get the right things done, don't overpromise and underdeliver, and you make no excuses for lack of results. So what do you do with this information? It's just it's just a quick assessment tool to inform you of trust behaviors. But one advice that I have is perhaps you want to get with your leadership team and kind of discuss how to build more trust in your leadership and organization. And so I'm putting up some questions here for action planning. If you are bold enough to admit that perhaps trust is something that needs to be developed and to build on for a trust culture. So I'm going to offer some additional questions here that you may want to ask yourself as a leader. One is, what actions, behaviors, habits, etc., increase your level of trust with others? Because these are things that you want to continue to do and improve upon. 2 is the opposite of that. If you scored low in those 6 areas, what actions, behaviors, habits decrease your level of trust with others? And you may want to begin to raise your self-awareness of the obstacles that are in the way of increasing your level of trust. And then 3, what one thing could you do to increase your trust with others, whether that is in your leadership team or with your subordinates? And it goes without saying, the quicker you put these action items into your planning and maybe discuss it in an open strategy meeting the higher the likelihood that they will happen and happen soon. So in closing my presentation, please remember this. Employee engagement is the key for high performance. This is the bottom line of my presentation. It's as real as the results of the latest profit and loss statements. In organizations today, the difference between engaged employees and disengaged employees often means the difference between success and failure. It's that critical. And it starts with looking within yourself first, having good self-awareness, right, to define your present reality, and then figure out what behaviors need to be learned and practiced. Well, that concludes today's presentation.
Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship, MILE.